still have 8 minutes. Is there anyone in this building that would like to say to this gathering what the Lord has done for them today? Well, for one, he gave us a new day. God gave us a new day today and granted us traveling mercies to get here in the rain, where there are accidents and that Dinah was sexually assaulted by a prince in the region and was given in marriage to him. Her brothers, however, sought justice by killing him and all the males of the region. Dinah is the only female mentioned in that line of descendants. There were probably more, but her story was significant. Now, who is Joseph? Now, every time we think of Joseph, what do we think about? The coat of many colors. What else? Say that again. The coat of long sleeves. I'm sorry, Kyle. Neither here nor there. What else? He was in prison. What else? Say that again. His father's favorite. He was falsely accused. He was forced into slavery. What else? He was a dreamer. Yes. All of those things. The coat of many colors or long sleeves, dreams, Potiphar's wife, the pit, the palace, rule, falsely accused. But what's the famous verse that we always pull on?
You meant it for evil, God meant it for good.
You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. We always pull on it, right? We always pull on it, especially when we have been wronged. Well, okay. In this Joseph story between Genesis 37 and 50, every chapter focuses on Joseph except one, and that's the chapter 38, in which it focuses on Judah. Judah was one of Joseph's brothers, and he has his own chapter and his own indiscretion and things going on in that chapter, in chapter 38. I swear, I'm gonna say this. The Bible is the best. It is the best, has the best stories in it. They are entertaining, they are truthful, they have messages, but they have a whole lot of drama in it. A whole lot. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob, and his family dynamic was a little precarious, was it not? A lot precarious. I named Jacob, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah. That's 4 women and 1 guy. Jacob was the father of 12 sons between 4 women. 4. And they all lived together. Jacob had a favorite, though, and it was Joseph. Joseph was the firstborn son of the love of his life, Rachel. And he loved Joseph more than anybody else. I'm not going to say more than Rachel, but some will argue that. He loved him, forsaking almost the rest of his kids. And what happens when you have a favorite, and how does that work in a household? It doesn't. Especially when you are showing favoritism. Correct? Joseph also is the only son not named in the 12 tribes of Israel. He was a favorite, but he did not have a tribe of his own. However, his sons took that tribe, Manasseh and Ephraim. You said Joseph was a dreamer. In chapters 37, we begin. He had two dreams in chapter 37, and his brothers hated him all the more. Starting in verse 6, I'll read. He said to them, "Listen to this dream that I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheep rose and stood upright. Then your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheep." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. He had another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I have had another dream. The sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What kind of dream is that you had? Shall we indeed come, and I and your mother and your brothers bow down to the ground before you?" So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept this in mind. Keep in mind and keep note of those two dreams. Joseph was sold into slavery at age 17. And who sold him? He sold them to slavery. However, what was their first inclination?
Killing.
Why did they want to kill him? Linda, can you come to the mic? Thank you.
They were jealous of him, and they hated him for the visions, for the dreams he was having. So they first sought to kill him, then to just throw him in a pit and leave him there. And then finally, one brother decided, well, we may as well make some money off of this deal. So let's get him out of the pit and sell him to the caravan as a slave.
Amen. He became a commodity. Just like Dr. Judy was referring to Daniel and the rest of the Israelites who were taken captive, they became a commodity. He became a commodity, and they sold him for 20 silver pieces. 20, at age 17. But the brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt and sold him to Potiphar. And who is the Ishmaelites? The Ishmaelites are his cousins. I just ran down Abraham, Sarah, Hagar, producing Isaac and Ishmael. The brothers of Joseph sold him to his cousins, and the cousins sold him to Egypt and to Potiphar. And Potiphar was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh. What was the cover-up? Well, the cover-up was ripping the favorite coat to shreds and dripping it into the animal's blood. And then they went home and told their father, he's dead. Animals got him. They attacked him. He's no more. And they left him in slavery. And it's one thing to have your family members sell you off as a commodity because they hated you so much. And here we are. Chapter 39 in Genesis is the setup. The setup, Potiphar's wife. Turn to chapter 39. I think I'll read all of it. And I'll be reading out of the New Revised Standard Version. Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, and an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. He was in the house of the Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in the sight and they attended to him. He made him overseer of the house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. And with him there, he had no concern for anything but the food that he ate. Now Joseph was handsome and good looking. And after a time, his master's wife cast eyes upon Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, with me here, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my hand. He is no greater in his house than I am, nor has he kept anything back from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not consent to lie beside her or to be with her. One day, however, when he went into the house to do his work, and while no one else was in the house, she caught hold of his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called out to the members of the household and said to them, "See, my husband has brought among us a Hebrew to insult us. He came in to me to lie with me. And I cried out with a loud voice, and when he heard me raise my voice and cry out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." Then she kept his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came into me to insult me. But as soon as I raised my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." When his master heard the words that the wife spoke to him, saying, "This is the way your servant treated me," he became enraged. And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. He remained there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. He gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Now, what sticks out to you? Come to the mic, please. I heard a lot of chatter, and nobody wants to come to the mic.
The Lord was with him.
And you didn't want to come to the mic. The Lord was with him. The writer says that every time he had a chance, the Lord was with him. Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Potiphar uses the fact that he was a Hebrew to justify or try to give some credence to her claim that she was attacked. So it's like that idea of maybe not racism the way we think of it, but negative ideas about Hebrews are kind of there as well.
Anybody else? Now look. Okay, I'm sorry.
Joseph had self-control.
Well, it doesn't say what Potiphar's life looked like. Oh, that was bad. Okay. I've read this story like a million times, and this is the first time I noticed that Joseph's garment was a central factor here. And it was used in sort of
His implication.
telling a lie about him.
Yes.
Good evening. It seems as though Joseph is an example of when you walk righteous, how you will be attacked. And he had faith, regardless of the attacks, that he would not go backward, because he's constantly, with his faith, being attacked. And the Christians today, we got to understand, when you walk with God, he ain't always cookies and cream.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm a little curious. So it tells us that once Joseph is delivered into Potiphar, that he saw that the Lord was with Joseph and Joseph was successful. So I'm curious to know, like, what does it look like being successful while being a slave? And how does someone else know that the Lord is with them and appoints them because of that?
Exactly. Exactly. What does that look like? You're still in captivity. You're still under somebody else's rule. You still can't leave when you want to. So even though the Lord prospered the house,
What it says
he
is
was still in bondage. Yes, ma'am.
no matter where Joseph was, he was in a position of authority. When he was in the house, he was in a position of authority. Even when he was jailed, the jailer left certain provisions up to Joseph to take care of. As long as God was watching over him, he was never at the bottom, he was at the top. And there are degrees of freedom. Favor doesn't mean that you're free. And as if you know anything about slavery, there were people who worked in the big house and there were people who worked in the field. So there are degrees of favor. So just because he was a slave, if he was a slave that reported only to the master and the mistress and no one else, he was above every other slave in that home. So that was a position of favor.
It was a position of authority. It was a favor from the Lord. The bottom line still is that I can't leave.
Oh, of course. But again, you have to always judge things from where you know them. If all you've ever known, if your parents were slaves, if your grandparents were slaves, then that's all he knew. So as far as he was, that was the best he could do in his station in life. That still was better than everyone else around him in that particular station.
His parents weren't slaves.
Well,
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
I
but you
hear what you're
understand.
saying. There are degrees of freedom, and there are
With
degrees
their
of
favor,
authority.
what the young man asked was that how was he considered being favored when he was a slave? You still have degrees of favor,
There's
no
still
matter where
degrees
you are
of favor. I agree
in
with
life.
you. I agree with you.
Right.
I agree with you. We're still a slave. We're still in captivity. But no one said that this boy was 17. None of us. We skipped right on over that he's a minor. A minor. She came onto this boy several times. And if it were today, it would have been child molestation, sexual harassment, attempted rape, depending on the state's age of consent, meaning if he was deemed a child at 17 or not. Regardless, he still resisted and said no, the same thing his sister Dina must have said in chapter 34. He was a boy. Probably he had never known a woman. And here this woman is coming onto him like, and I have a job to do. I was put here to protect you too, but you're not protecting me. Did he really have the right to say no? But he said it. Leaving a piece of his garment in her hand. And then Mrs. Potiphar lied and cried rape, accusing an underage boy of raping her because she needed to be vindicated. She was mad that she was refused. And we can relate to this, can we not? We've seen stories like this time and time again. But we love the story of Joseph. It's a story of redemption, right? Liberation theology at its best, next to Exodus. And he sticks it to his brothers, right? At the end. And what's that favorite verse again? What you meant for evil, God meant for good. He was able to save the Egyptians and his family and reunited with his father. We are quick to give him and get him to the palace. But we never really focus on the prison experience. We never sit there. Because in our Bible, the next chapter or two, he's in the palace. As if it only took however long it took us to read it, that's how long he was in prison. He was in a physical prison. In in chapter 39, Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. He remained there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. He gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all of the prisoners who were in prison. And whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. The physical prison, let's talk with the brothers. They threw him in a pit. That's the first time he was confined, right? They threw him in a pit after threatening to kill him, not knowing if they would leave him there to die. Darkness in that pit. Screams going unheard, let me out. Begging to be let out as they verbally tormented their little brother. A physical prison. They sold him into slavery to strangers for 20 pieces of silver, who sold him to Potiphar for much more, presumably. And a 17-year-old boy is sold away from his family and brought to a foreign land. But the Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord is all he had. He prospered in his position in the house, but still in captivity, because there was no one there to defend him and corroborate the stories between Mrs. Potiphar's word, which word is good no matter what, because of her position. They locked him up on trumped-up charges for rape. The boy may not ever have known a woman before, and here we are with a sexual assault charge when they see us. Imagine being in a foreign land in a dark, damp enclosure. At 17, you may have had a window. Don't know if there was a pallet or mattress of any kind. You may have had to sleep on the floor. Was there a bathroom? Possibly no mandatory bathing. Was there grooming? You're behind a locked door. Was it a private cell? Maybe not. No mandatory hour of daylight. But you were fed every day. How do I know he was fed every day? Joseph was in prison for 13 years. He lasted 13 years behind bars. There's a physical prison, but there's also a mental prison that comes with that. What do you think happens to someone when they're locked behind doors and cannot get out on their own? It's a caging feeling. Caged, like an animal. May even begin to feel like an animal. One of the internships that I had in divinity school was going to a youth detention center and tutoring and Bible study and everything, and it hurt my heart every time I had to go and leave, because I had to leave them in there. I had to take a class. It was a restorative justice class. And we visited a state prison and a federal prison. Two different things. Two different experiences. When I walked into the state prison on the hall, they were behind a glass enclosure, and it was dormitory style. It was as if you were in a zoo, peering at somebody living. When we walked in, you see this cage. And I said, what is that? Because it was a cage. It was maybe 4 by 8, maybe. I said, what is that? My colleague was there with me. She took that same class. And I got freaked out. That's where we have to put them when something goes awry. We have to isolate the residents, and we put them there. And I don't know about you, Camille, but I had a flashback of Roots, and I wasn't there. A cage. You're putting people in a cage. Somehow it did not feel restorative at all. And while I understand that there needed to be separation, and I understand that there needed to be safety for all, the cage got me. And I can't imagine what it felt like for them to have a class of mostly white students come and visit and watch them behind glass. How degrading would that have been? Was that for them? And I think I told my professor I need to step out. I don't think this is for me. I don't think this is for me. And it hurt me. Yes. You know, you gotta go to the mic, Carrie.
So as you were telling that story, I was thinking about our visit to Israel. And you don't necessarily have to be in a cage to feel that way.
That's right.
Because when we went to the settlements where they had placed the people, it was the same effect. And knowing that you had a boundary that you could not cross because you would get shot.
That's right.
You could have a mental cage that does not have walls or windows.
Exactly. Yes. And in this mental prison, yes, I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off.
I can actually speak on that. I work in corrections, so whenever there are tours, you know, everybody's going around, standing around, this is that, and after the tour, the inmates come to me and say, why they in here? Why they staring at us? So they cannot stand it.
They don't like it.
So I kind of have to play the kind of, well, they're here because of, A, B, and C. And like, well, still, they're here and we're here, during our time, awaiting. And it's not a good feeling. It's not. It's not.
No, I would imagine not. They are relying on someone else for everything. For food, for water, for clothing, possible protection. Some studies show that a person can become institutionalized after 90 days. Joseph did 13 years. Institutionalized, meaning their mental capabilities to think and do for themselves become a little paralyzed in a way, as well as being accustomed to and conditioned to the controlled way of being. Don't necessarily know how to operate by themselves without somebody telling them what to do, where to be. You can't be here, but you can be here. And you have to be here at a certain time. You can shower at this time. You can go to the bathroom at this time if you don't have a bathroom in your cell. You can go outside at this time. And institutionalization sets in and don't know where to be. Now you know you're gonna have to come to the mic, right, Kyle? Go ahead on.
Let's do a workshop, a conference on mass incarceration, and you can watch some seminars online. But the keynote was Michelle Alexander.
Yes, from the new Jim Crow.
From the Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. And in her address, she talks about prisons, but the new shift toward digital prisons, as in house arrest and this whole system of parole and monitoring as a form of confinement that's also part of this larger prison complex.
Prison complex, industrial prison complex system.
Outside of the actual prison itself.
Mm-hmm. Parole and the recidivism rate.
And house arrest and, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Inside, they are still commodities. They're making money off of people by them being in the building, by them using the products that they are giving. They are making money off of our Black and brown people, as well as other races. 13 years of not having family check on him, not being able to bribe him, get word to him, no friends, isolation. He had nobody but God. And God sent him the chief jailer who looked upon him favorably and gave him a job. Important. The importance of giving a resident, because I don't like saying inmate, a resident a job, it begins to rebuild the self-worth. It gives them activity so they don't have to sit idly by, because for a few hours they are out of the mental prison doing a task for the common good. And some get paid to do it. Very minimal pay. I had a family member that did time, and his job, I think minimum wage was like $4.25 at the time. This is a long time ago, I'm sorry. I think he was earning 50 cents an hour. Great disparity. But it gave him a sense of purpose to get up because he knew he had a job to do. To still be able to function, to still be able to help people, because I think he was in the infirmary helping people. It gave him a sense of purpose to build his self-worth that had been torn down for several years. And what did Joseph have to hold on to? What do you think? What did he have to hold on to? His strength, and what else? God, Lord, okay.
His dreams.
Yes. The dreams that God gave him and the gift to interpret dreams. The hope and the gifting. The dreams that God gave him that I've read in chapter 37, he held on to those dreams. And in Matthew 25, Jesus spoke about doing for the least of these, feeding, clothing, going to see people in prison. Human familiarity gives us hope and gives them hope. You thought about me. I matter to you. You came to see me. You wrote me a letter. You prayed for me and let me know that you prayed for me. Those kinds of things, the human familiarity, even though they may not be able to touch you, they can have that interaction with somebody from the outside that cares for them when nobody, it seemed as if no one else does. Do you know how many giftings that are behind prison walls? How many talents that are there that we have yet to tap into? Some of us have wrote them off, depending on what happened. Did they deserve to be there? Did they get falsely accused like other people? A lot of DNA evidence coming up and freeing people. The families are also in prison with the resident. And there was a breach in the community circle when the crime happened, and this person is missing. Almost like a void that death gives, but because it is out of your control, you can't speak to them when you want to, you can't see them when you want to, and there are visitation days and times in which they can use the phone. It's different. You are in prison with them. Still with the prison experience. With Joseph, he gets a couple of friends inside. In chapter 40, the cupbearer and the baker get thrown into the prison from the Pharaoh. And Joseph befriends them, even though he has a job and he's the overseer over them, but he's still locked up too. His friends have dreams and Joseph interprets them. His gifts are shown. But guess what? They are released. And Joseph says, "Remember me." But they don't. They leave him and his misery and his memory in prison. So what does he have left to hold on to? His dreams. Chapter 41, here it comes. Chapter 41, with Pharaoh dreams, the turn of events. Pharaoh has a few dreams and no one can interpret them, and he's getting angry and angry, and then the cupbearer that begins to remember Joseph and Joseph rises to power. The turn of events, Joseph is sent to utilize his gifts in the palace. After he does, he still doesn't know if he will be sent back or not. The cupbearer and the baker used him for his gifts and forgot about him. Why wouldn't Pharaoh? But God was with Joseph, right? Because Joseph remembered that God was with him, and his interpretation of the dreams focused on all-powerful, the all-knowing, providing God, which was not some foreign God. The one who he knew growing up and remembered him while he was in prison. Joseph became the chief cheerleader of the Lord because he remembered God was with him. God had been with him the entire time. And God was the only one that will be able to, one, interpret your dreams through me, but also save this land. God, not Ra. God, not Horus. Egyptian gods that were around. And it is even said that Pharaoh was also deemed as a deity. Not you, but God. Turned the table of events, but also pointed to the Lord. And he became Egyptianized and went to the palace. We're excited, right? We're good? We're excited about being in the palace? Are we excited about being in the palace? Are we really? We're excited about being in the palace because we're out of the prison walls, right? They Egyptianized him. Something that Dr. Judy, this is Dr. Judy's word, I'm taking it. They Egyptianized him. They changed his name to Zaphanath Paneah. It is unknown, but perhaps it means stored beautiful rest. Stored beautiful rest. Was he resting beautiful inside? No. But the stored beautiful rest points to the interpretation of the dream that Pharaoh had. He gave him the interpretation that there would be 7 years of famine and 7 years of fruitfulness. So grow all you can and store it up because there's a famine coming. Stored a beautiful rest. He married an Egyptian Asenath. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. The second he named Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my misfortunes. It's all good, but let us not forget the mental prison and possible institutionalization that still exists. As difficult as it was inside, it might be even more difficult outside. How many saw Shawshank Redemption? It was difficult inside. And when Morgan Freeman and a few of his other residential friends were released, some of them could not handle it. It became too much. We're so used to having someone tell you what to do, where to be, where to go, how to live, when to eat. They couldn't deal and could not think and be for themselves. The environment and the people he knew were different. And that sometimes happens when people are released. Depending on how much time that they've done. They come home and everything is different. Everything is different. street signs, they had mile markers, and people are gone. Different. Because some of them are in a state of arrested development. He may have still been 17 years old mentally, but 30 on the outside, trying to still catch up. Like I said, I had friends and family who were in prison for a time. And when they came home, it was hard. Some did upwards of 20 years. 20. When they came in, there was only a few subway stations. Now it's a whole bunch of them. And what are they using to get on the subway but a car, not a paper thing? Well, how do I get one of those? I don't know where I'm going. What happened to the jumbo that was on the corner? People's Drugstore is not in business anymore. It's now CVS. I slept on the floor for a few weeks or a month because the bed was too soft. Different. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this new normal is supposed to be. And I'm supposed to get a job. One would be in a house and one would call my name every 15 to 20 minutes. Say, yes, I'm here. Okay, I just want to make sure I know where you are, because when it gets too quiet, I get nervous. Used to a lot of noise, and when it got quiet, it became dangerous. Adjusting to a normal. Now, we're excited that Joseph got to the palace. We're excited that he was there, that he got from the pit and the prison to the palace. But what was his mental state when he got there? What was it like? Did he know how to do his job, or was he still thinking like a 17-year-old? What was it like? What was it like? What do we also know, though? God was with him. And just like God was with him in the pit, amongst his brothers, in the prison, God will also be with him in the palace. There is a redemption there, and restorative justice there. There in Genesis 42 through 50, you see the reuniting of a family. Even though there are bumps in that, because there's still forgiveness that has to be bestowed. You tried to kill me. You locked me up. You sold me off. And now you need my help. I told you this dream was going to come true. I told you that you would be bound and down to me. But there's a sense of humility that comes, because deep down he still loves his brothers, but loves God even more. Because the redemption comes, and God was with him in the pit. God was with him in the prison. God was with him in the palace. And God was with him at this moment and said, forgive them. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. I was here for a purpose, and I'm living out my purpose. And God would stay committed to Israel and bless them, even in bondage, in struggles and suffering and near death and destruction of a people. Joseph was almost destroyed, but God is faithful. Amen. When we are thinking about people who are locked up and residing in behind the prison walls, remember that there is redemption. Remember that there is restoration. Remember that there is a resurrection that can happen, because just like God is with you every day, God is with them as well. He is faithful. Amen? Amen. Amen. At this time, I have a song. I'm always dealing with a song, right? I know with Song is Testimony, I usually do that. But music always ministers to me. And as I was preparing for Bible study and thinking hard and long about what to even say, how much to share, how much to divulge, but also be truthful and transparent and in my best way to be restorative to the folks that I can't touch right now. This song came to mind, and that it is a message of hope and a mantra that I pray that people will instill in them to never give up. Because there is redemption, there is restoration, and there is a resurrection. And this is called It's Not Over by Karen Clark Sheard.
And the Lord spoke to me and said, it's not over. God says it's over. It's not over. God says it's over. He's with you through stormy weather. Oh, God, God I serve. He fails you never. He is a man of his word. It's not over. Just hold on.